This is Joseph Farah from WND-TV, and we're here with Todd Akin, the author of a new book, Firing Back. And he's been all over the media, but today we're going to give him a little bit more time to tell his story than maybe he gets a chance to do at some of the other news outlets. Todd Akin, good to see you.
It's a pleasure, Joseph.
Thank you for being here at WND-TV. Todd, the media are still going crazy over what you said some 18 months ago in August 2012 in an interview that is infamous at this point. Couple of words, legitimate rape, and so forth.
Right.
The fascination over that has not died down.
Right.
How do you explain that? I've looked, but before you answer, let me just say that I have watched that interview in context now numerous times.
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out what it was that you did that was so heinous.
Right. Well, let's take it head on, because the first term is, quote, legitimate rape. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what I said. And immediately after that played Sunday, Monday, the president jumps into some press conference and has to make fun of legitimate rape. Well, if you think about it, if your objective in a Saul Alinsky kind of fashion is to make fun of somebody, it's an opportunity. If you look at it in any kind of rational way, does anybody think that rape is legitimate? It doesn't make any sense at all, unless you're really a wild liberal, and we talk about that in Firing Back. Mm-hmm. But the legitimate rape is an abbreviation. It's used by law enforcement, and when you unabbreviate it, it means a legitimate case of rape. So in other words, the police write legitimate rape and they're doing an investigation or whatever. So that's what the word means, but it was an abbreviation. But by abbreviating it, instead of saying legitimate case of rape, it gave the Democrats an opportunity to try to make fun of me, to twist my meaning all out of shape. And then they went from there to all kinds of absurdities, things that were exactly opposite of things I'd said in that comment. So that was the beginning of it. And in the book, we talk about that, deal with those comments, but then we move forward to what do you see that? Because this is a pattern. What happened to me is kind of a pattern for a number of things that are going on. And one of them is that idea of just basically assassinating somebody's character by trying to misunderstand something, act outraged, repeat it endlessly, ask people if they're outraged. They don't even know what you said, they're outraged. And so you try to create this snowball effect, which is a character assassination. Now, in God's word, it says, don't bear false witness against your neighbor, but we're doing that all over the place, and that's all considered fair nowadays.
Now, you've brought up the president's role in this media frenzy that we're seeing still now 2 years later. And so I want to zero in on that. Let's talk about what Obama said that day, because I don't think this has really been raised by very many people. Here's what he said. Let me say, first of all, the views expressed were offensive.
The views expressed were offensive. Rape is rape. And the idea that we should be parsing and qualifying and slicing what types of rape we're talking about doesn't make sense to the American people. And certainly doesn't make sense to me. So what I think these comments do underscore is why we shouldn't have a bunch of politicians, a majority of whom are men, making healthcare decisions on behalf of women. And so although these particular comments have led Governor Romney and other Republicans to distance themselves, I think the underlying notion that we should be making decisions on behalf of women for their health care decisions, or qualifying forcible rape versus non-forcible rape. I think those are broader issues, and that is a significant difference in approach between me and the other party. But I don't think that they would agree with the senator from Missouri in terms of his statement, which was way out there.
And was that Todd Akin?
I don't think so. I don't think anybody
Does that legislation say Todd Akin care?
On Obamacare? No, I don't think so. Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah. It truly is.
Yeah, to the other side, because you're talking about a hypocrisy here, about somebody who's talking out of both sides of their mouth. Here's the other thing. Where of all of the what is the one word you associate with pro-abortionists?
The one word?
Pro-choice. They're always saying they're pro-choice.
Well, I don't associate that
No,
word.
I don't. But I mean, that's what they want to say. We're for choice. We have our choice, you have your choice. But it's a bunch of baloney. They're not for choice at all. Because in Obamacare, they're saying your choice is to take your money and pay for a form of abortion, even though it's against your conscience. Now, it used to be they say, well, let me do what I want, you do what you want. Not anymore. There's no choice here at all. Right. This is like the communist idea of choice. You can have any choice you want as long as you do what I tell you.
Exactly.
And that's, of course, even the Supreme Court saw through that. And that's why they made the recent decision in Hobby Lobby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Todd, now we have talked about this off camera.
Yeah.
The fact that what you were doing in that interview with Charles Jaco, I think is the interviewer's name. Yeah. He should be famous at this point, just as famous as Todd Akin. But what you were doing was explaining the pro-life position.
Right. Not very well, but...
Well, actually, I think if you back up on the tape a little bit, it turns into one of the most, I would have to say, one of the most articulate and well-crafted explanations of the position. And one of the things you were saying back then, and maybe you can kind of recreate it for us, you were talking about how on 9/11, people were rushing into the burning, caving building to rescue people who they didn't even know.
Right.
And what that says about the character of our nation and how that relates to the...
Yeah, this is my point I was trying to make, that there is inside America a core of people that have certain basic beliefs that have always been precious to the heritage of our nation. And part of those beliefs is to give yourself to help other people, to be there to help the other guy. It's not me first, but there is a selflessness among a whole lot of very decent Americans that may not be very famous or popular. And you saw that on September 11th. And I make a case in Firing Back that you see what people practice, they become. You take a guy like Todd Beamer. Grown up and he's learned to do things for other people, to assume some leadership. He's strong and he cares about other people. And when it comes game time on September 11th, he is leading the charge to save those of us who were in the Capitol building. Now, skip over to somebody else that I don't know the name of, that had spent their life trying to get something for nothing. And when September 11th happened, they were some of the looters, which we care to forget about. And those are the choices that every American has before them. Do you want to be part of the solution, or you want to be just one of those people who is kind of going into the mists and the darkness where there's no freedom, no satisfaction, no joy?
I want to cover another part of that. There's so much going on in those few seconds of that Jaco interview, and people are still talking about it, but none of them are really getting to the root of it. Because when the president talked about rape is rape, first of all, were you suggesting rape was not rape?
No, I wasn't suggesting rape isn't rape, but of course from a legal point of view, you've got statutory rape. So lawyers make distinctions in types of rape, okay? But he was just doing the soundbite clip.
Right.
And people are going to stop and say, well, actually what you just said didn't really make much sense if you're an attorney. But aside from that...
Well, it doesn't make sense if you're anybody, because no one is contesting that rape is not rape.
Well, I don't know a conservative. I mean, I've been in politics for 4 years. I don't know any conservatives who are soft on rape.
Exactly.
Now, there's some liberals, we talk about them in the book, and they're pretty weird, but no conservative is soft on rape. So how do you interpret one of the most conservative legislators in Missouri and say he's soft on rape? I mean, it doesn't even add up on the surface.
Now, one of the things you talk about in the book is the fact that when you were referring to this idea that women's bodies have a way of shutting down, what you were really saying in shorthand and soundbite language is that the few studies that have been done on this question of rape leading to pregnancy, if you take the broadest, wildest estimates by the pro-abortion crowd, which is trying to use this as a way of of course, getting rid of, of legalizing all abortions for any reason at any time, they suggest that 5% of women who are raped become pregnant. And why do they use 5%? Because that's the standard average. For when a man and woman have sex, there's a 5% chance of the woman becoming pregnant. So right there, we're talking about 1 out of 20 chance of a rape, an actual legitimate rape, and I'm saying that now, Todd Akin.
Legitimate case of rape.
Exactly.
Better be careful.
Leading to pregnancy.
Right.
So 1 out of 20 seems like, those are tough odds. That's not 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 20. So why is it so hard for people to recognize the fact that and by the way, the 5% figure is totally illegitimate because of what the basis of what you talked about. Every study, including 2 brand new studies done this year, show that stress reduces that number dramatically.
Sure.
And you used an analogy to talk about that. We all know people who, who have tried to get pregnant and then they give up after a few years and they adopt, and what happens?
They get pregnant.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And it's always attributed to stress. Now, why is this so hard for people to zero in on? Why do we want to avoid the science behind this and jump to conclusions that we see being jumped to in the media and by your political opponents today?
Right. And to a degree, and I've been trying to make this point, Joseph, all of this, in a way, is sort of a big parenthesis leading up to the big question. And this is what I was being asked by Jaco, actually, because he was trying to put me on the spot. And the question is this: does a child conceived in rape have the same right to life as a child conceived in love? That's the big question. Mm-hmm. For me, I've answered it. The answer is yes.
Right. Earlier this year, the government came out with a study that claimed 1 out of every 5 college women were raped. And when George Will, very thoughtful columnist, had the audacity to question that statistic, your hometown paper dropped his column, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And he was harshly condemned all around the country. In fact, the very harshest criticisms of George Will from contesting that 1 out of 5 figure was to compare him with you, Todd Akin. Why can't we have rational discussions about this subject of rape? Another example was, Rush Limbaugh got into all kinds of trouble when he went after Sandra Fluck, or however she pronounces her name, for suggesting that the birth control was, a right that every woman had to have, not just a right to have it, but to have it subsidized for her by taxpayers. And, it's become this issue that you just can't discuss rationally and objectively in the public arena.
Right.
Why?
Right. Well, I think that's one of the themes in Firing Back that we talk about. And it is going all the way back to the old Saul Alinsky and his tactics. Instead of dealing with the thought or the issue or the question at hand, instead what you do is you try to destroy their character. You make fun of them, and you don't deal with the question at hand, but you simply say, look at this person, and then you label them, they're sexist or they're racist or they're this, and you put labels on them and you repeat it endlessly, and you have such a big megaphone with the liberal media, and then they're increasingly training people not to stick your head up because they'll label you with the same label as someone else. And it's a form of very destructive politics, and it's the attempt to destroy people's credibility. And it's used by the left very effectively, to the point that the Republicans cower and are afraid of it. And it's my belief, because people ask me sometimes, Joseph, aren't you afraid maybe you're getting the Republicans in trouble by writing your book or standing up in these questions? And my belief is it's time in America for heroes, for people who have the courage to stand up for what's right, for call truth truth, for calling what they're doing a terrible tactic to destroy America and to destroy other people. and just call them out on that. And that anything that's based on lies and distrust, untruth, we just have to fight those things. And we have to take them head on and stop being afraid of these guys.